Welcome to episode 32 of the Silver Savage podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Masada Tactical. Check out the new online store for merchandise and swag. Go to masadatactical.com. In this episode, fresh from SHOT Show 2023, Vika and Steve chat about what you should have on you if you have a concealed carry permit, what are some tactical considerations to have, and we top it all off with a recent incident Steven was involved with and a quick debrief of that one. Here's episode 32. Discussing concealed carry and what you should know. Steven, I missed you. I haven't seen you almost a week. I was at SHOT Show. How was Maryland?
Exhausting because I had to cover for your ass while you were gone. But I love it. No, go ahead.
I say I do appreciate you covering for me. That is
I love
a huge help.
That's the whole basis of Masada. It's not just the teaching and whatnot. It's our gym, our the root, right? That's how I met you. That's what what it was before it was what it is now. And it gives me a chance to see our senior students. So I love teaching on Wednesdays. And for some reason, I love teaching the kids now. I'm like addicted to the kids class. It's so much fun because I get to be a kid again.
And I heard my son who decided to show up, which I'm very proud of him for wanting to come while I was gone. Yeah. But I heard it was still a pain in the ass, and he ended up doing a lot of push-ups, which is good.
It's not just you, so you're good. So you can validate you're an awesome dad because he was like that for me too.
All right. Well, I will tell you what I appreciate about being back, not having to sell a kidney to get a shot of makers. Freaking drinks are expensive.
And since you're back and you're on it, I am also drinking the makers.
Fine.
Let's go.
All right. So SHOT Show was good. Actually, I must admit, for the first time in over a decade of going, it was extremely productive. I usually get a little bit here, a little bit there, some little nuggets that we can implement. This year, we got some good connections going on, some good projects we're going to start working on.
I'm going to interject here because I do want to hear this, and I know our members want to hear this. So you've been going to SHOT Show for quite a long time, right? I have never been to SHOT Show with you. I was supposed to go this year with you, but I also had to cover the classes. And I have to say, seeing the interactions, online and back and forth when we talk, what you're about to share, was awesome. So I was like, great. The one I missed was one of the best ones yet. But go ahead.
No, but you know what? But it's only going to get better from here because those relationships are being established now. For 10 years, that show is overwhelming. Over 50,000 people, I think, this year, which is a little lower than it was pre-COVID, but higher than last year. The floor certainly extended into 2 hotels now, and in the past it was walking around a lot, seeing a lot of cool guns, seeing some what we would call celebrities, right, but not really interacting with anybody. This year we started actually creating relationships, and you certainly need to come 1 year, and these relationships are going to grow, so you're going to have an opportunity to see it all after I laid the groundwork for you. So you're welcome.
What's funny, I was following a couple of my Marine Corps buddies who were there. I didn't tell them that Masada was there and whatnot because they were representing their companies, but some of the guys I served with and deployed with were actually walking the floor of recording. I was like, go figure, like this year, like all these people are there that I know as well. But go ahead. I know you talked to a couple new retailers that we haven't really worked with before, establishing new relationships on top of fortifying the ones that already exist with IWI and Mantis. So tell us about that.
Well, so some of these retailers, though, I'm actually going to leave in the back for the time being until some of those relationships are actually solidified. So I don't know, throw them under the bus in a sense. But you mentioned Mantis. We work with them for a while now, right? We're big proponents of them. And on a different episode, we should probably talk about, some things that people can do dry fire to continue training and how to incorporate that. But they'll be an integral part, and they're partnering with us on those Havoc games that are coming April 30th. So if you're out there listening and you want to get with a partner, teams of 2, we're taking 25 teams. There's going to be 3 events. Think tactical games, just with laser markers instead of live fires, and a true tactical application. So not just fitness and marksmanship, but also you're going to get docked points if your tactics are not solid, if your approach to an evolution is incorrect. So it should be a lot of fun. We already have some people signed up, and Mantis is going to be an invaluable component of it. They're going to have their people there helping in scoring, introducing some of their new products, So we're going to be one of the first ones to try them out and actually put them through the paces. So that's going to be exciting. IWI is always fun. We've been working with them for a few years, and we're only going to solidify and push that even more. So anything that's IWI related, if you guys go on IWI .us and you go into the academy, you're going to see the classes they're putting up, and you're going to find us co-teaching or even lead teaching some of those in the upcoming year or so. So looking forward to a lot of that. But actually, one of the most important meetings we had, which was not as sexy as some of the other ones, right? It wasn't about guns. It wasn't about, a fun training evolution or anything like that. It was with a company that I personally supported for the past 2 years. And we were able to meet with them and extend it. And that company is called US Law Shield. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But really what it is, it's an insurance for people that that have a concealed carry permit and carry, and how to protect them in the event they actually end up using their firearms, which prompted this podcast because I mentioned this to you, and you had an event a couple of weeks ago that you were carrying concealed and had to actually draw your firearm. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Um, but before we get into that, I figured it would be worthwhile for a lot of our listeners. Many of them took our concealed carry permit, the CCW class in Maryland. A lot of them we teach nationally. Oftentimes we talk about deploying firearms from concealment and so forth. So I figure it would be a good idea to do an episode talking about concealed carry and what's entailed, starting with what are some of the items, the gear that you should carry, how to train for carrying concealed, what are some of the tactical considerations if you have to deploy your firearms, and the aftermath, which is, I, I think the biggest thing that people neglect is not talking what happens after a shooting. And I would love to talk about that as well.
Man,
So
absolutely. And this might be one of those episodes that might be a two-part, three-parter, etc. Because one thing
either
I'll
that or it's a 4 hour episode, either or.
and here's the thing, and I think you can agree with me on this. Like when we came together, our tactics are synonymous, yet there were differences, and we came together. That's the whole idea of Masada, right? That hybrid approach. But even with concealed carry, though it's synonymous in nature, how we carry it, it's different. Like my everyday carry, my EDC is different from yours. If we did a dump, they'd be similar, but they're going to be different. Granted, I'm genetically predisposed to carry a lot of knives because I'm Puerto Rican. And I can say that. If I hurt your feelings, oh well, go suck it. But that being said, I'm a firm believer in knives. So EDCs vary from time to time. So we'll discuss that here as
Well,
well about that
well,
concealed
let's
carry.
start with that because we talk about concealed carry, and a lot of people that come to our classes, one of the first things I tell them is it's another tool in the toolbox. And 99% of the time, it is not the right tool for the job. Right. Once you
Amen.
draw that gun, yeah, you lock yourself into a certain corner, into a certain position where you're now limited in options in a sense. You either have to shoot or you'll have to reholster to go hands free. And there's a lot of considerations, from your ability to shoot, the environment, right? What's the backdrop like? Can I shoot a bad guy if, let's say, my child is behind him, right? So
Right.
probably
And
not.
that's what I'm going to highlight too. And you bring up a good point, right? Because someone makes a conscious decision to become a concealed carry person, right? You're taking on a responsibility, almost like when an officer, a firefighter, etc., first responder says, I'm going to put myself above everyone, put everyone else above me and save them. When you carry a weapon, you're taking on a large responsibility and liability, and a lot of people don't really know the gravity of it, right? Because we know this as law enforcement, as a former law enforcement officer, you as one and former military, when you decide to carry a firearm, right? You don't realize that every situation you encounter from here on out, there's always going to be a firearm involved. And that's yours, right? Whether the perp has a gun or not. And we've seen countless videos of people that are concealed carrying members and they draw their firearms, but they don't have the training to back it up and they get their weapon taken away or knocked away. And then the perp takes the gun from them. So if
And
you're gonna be a concealed carry member, you got to reinforce that with training, etc. And the list goes on.
yeah, and I'll follow up on that. I mean, mindset is key, right? So those videos that you refer to when people draw their farms, I talk about them in my training, right? There's an issue with that. If you did not make that mental switch to actually use that firearms, right, and you're just using it as source of intimidation, you may actually put yourself in a worse case than you were before. That may be an incentive for your attacker to actually charge and try and take your gun away from you. right? There's a quote I love. I forgot the name of the guy that wrote it.
We can
The,
quote
the
him later.
name, yeah, the name of the book though is "When Violence Is the Answer." A phenomenal book, and a quote is saying that it says, because I 100% agree with it. It says, "Violence is rarely the answer, but when it is the answer, it is the only answer." And
Right.
and I and I stress to the students, I'm saying, listen, I would consider myself to be okay in a fight. We've been teaching self-defense, defensive tactics for the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years. We've been in fights, whether sanctions fights or street fights or on uniform, off uniform, right? We've I'm decent at it. I'm okay, compared to most of the population. I'll be the first one to admit there's no winner in a fight. There's the
No.
person that loses less. And most people that haven't been through that evolution don't understand that. If I choose to go hands on, it's because I absolutely eliminated any other options, because I would check my ego to the door and do whatever I can to avoid going hands on, just because I know there's a chance of me being injured, family around me being injured. There's repercussions to it.
I'm living proof of that, right? Two
Yep.
two back surgeries later, 6 knee surgeries later, and it was one of those situations where I couldn't draw my firearm, couldn't use pepper spray, couldn't use a taser because I was in a confined medical environment, and I had to go hands on. And I knew that this was not going to end well, but I had to commit because violence was the only answer at that point. There was no
Yep.
reasoning, there was no talking, there was no hugging. Again, I don't care if I offend you. That shit don't work. When violence is the answer, it is the only answer. And I paid the price. I lost less, but I still paid the price.
Exactly, 100%. And we're going to talk about your events in a little bit, but the most recent one. But part of the consideration that was going through your mind in our discussion is, there's a lot of other variables here I need to consider. It's not just me and the perpetrator, it is my kids in my car, and what would potentially happen then. So is actually shooting the best option or not, right? So we're going to talk about it, but let's take a step back, right? So people go through a class and they decide they're going to carry a gun, which I absolutely support 100%. Obviously, I'm a pro 2A, but also I'm a firm believer that the only thing that would stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, right? Police, as you and I know very well, are minutes away when second count. Um,
Mhm.
Living proof is that dude in Indiana that shot the we call it active shooter, for lack of a better term, at the mall, and engaged him and put him down, and arguably saved countless lives in the process, right?
Yes.
I have a lot of different questions about that event, but all said and done, hero on all account, he stopped the shooter, right? So I
And here
do.
to reinforce what you're saying real quick, not to change the subject or interrupt,
Mhm.
which I am interrupting. I don't know if I can quote websites here, but Heritage, I think it's heritage.org. They do a phenomenal job of documenting 2A events where the good guy with the gun is the winner, is or
Right.
less loser, as we like to put it, because whether it's physical trauma or emotional trauma, there's going to be trauma. And one
Yeah.
of the most recent being a mom defending her kids from being kidnapped.
It's very easy for the people that are trying to force gun control to say guns are evil, right? But they quote all those tragedies that happened, but they forget about all the good times that guns actually save lives, right? So, there's a legislation about to be introduced in
Can't,
Maryland,
can't carry
kind of
anywhere.
following New York. Every place of mass gathering is a public spot, and you can't carry a gun there, right? That's in response to the Supreme Court saying that, prohibiting or right,
Yeah.
allowing people essentially to carry guns. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't understand the logic. So you're going to prevent law-abiding citizens from carrying guns, but that doesn't stop the bad guy. But we're going to leave politics and logic to
Right.
other people. That's above our pay grade.
And
So,
and BK, you've seen enough death and destruction as I have, and I can say this, because we have both cried in each other's presence. We have, chased each other's demons away, and I don't think you would disagree with me that I wish firearms never existed. All right,
yeah,
but you know what? That the Chinese invented the arquebus, and it went from there, and they are here. They exist. We got to live with them. It ain't gonna. They're not gonna magically disappear. All right,
no.
so and that's where we come in: the safety, the training, the
Yeah.
proper use, etc.
And we touched on it last episode when we interviewed Isabella about how important education is, right? To get people to my kids, they and your kids as well, right? They grow up around firearms, they get educated on safe handling and the safety rules that are associated with it. I'm not worried about my kid becoming one of those threats to society, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with they're mentally healthy and they have respect to the tool, and that's about it.
Right. Be
But
a part
let's
of this, not the problem.
exactly. So let's talk about what to carry, right? So when I talk about when we start the discussion, right, people want to carry a firearm, which is great, but what else should you carry? So this is some of the stuff that I mentioned, and tell me if you agree, disagree, or you carry anything different. But
Yeah,
I start by telling
know
them,
this.
obviously,
You can talk about your ADC, and I'll talk about mine. And more than likely, our viewers are and listeners are going to see that they're pretty much exactly the same, minus one or two things.
right. So I always tell people if you carry a firearm, you have to have an extra magazine. Well, actually, let me take a step back. It has to be in a proper holster. Um, if you don't have proper retention and you may lose the gun in a fight, it's going to fall off. That's shit. And if it doesn't cover the trigger guard and protects you from accidental discharge, then it's shit also. So have
Mhm.
the firearm you're carrying in a proper holster. Then you should have an extra magazine. Not because I expect you to shoot all the rounds you have in one magazine, have to go dry and then reload. It's because if you have a malfunction, the quickest way to eliminate at least two of the variables, whether the malfunction is ammo related or magazine related, is by introducing a fresh magazine in and keep going. So I'm a big supporter. If you carry a gun, carry a second mag. I'll be honest, probably if I'm rushed for time, or if I because there's only so much real estate, and as I get lazy, the one thing I sometimes will leave behind is a second mag. But you know me, if I take my gun off in the office, there's usually a second mag that comes out with it. I'll
And not only
typically have
that, you're amongst other people and individuals that are going to have more ammo. But
right.
continue.
Um, so a second mag in an appropriate pouch. I tell people you have to have a source of illumination. Ideally, a handheld flashlight because I'm more likely to use my flashlight than need my firearm, right?
Mm.
But again, being one of those that real estate is over premium, I have a 32-inch waist and I can't keep carrying stuff on me. So if I can compound things and bundle them up, I do. So a
I
flashlight on.
laugh because I know the flashlight is one of the first things that goes with you, and I'm a big proponent of flashlights. I teach our low light
Yep.
course, and I talk about flashlight tactics in our executive protection course as a means of self defense and offense and stuff like that. But I laugh because I know that's one of the first things you're gonna ditch.
Yep. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of space and it's bulky. But the the numbers of stupid accidents when people shoot a loved one because of misidentification is just there's no reason, there's no justification for it. Have a source of illumination. FBI database, right? If you go on the crime database, it tells you a few things. One of them, most shootings happen at close proximity, 3 to 5 feet, so really
Mhm.
close. And the other one is they happen at low light conditions, so not necessarily no light, but certainly low light. So having a source of illumination makes sense. I
Yep,
tell
and that's a
people,
in our classes. So
yeah, 100%. I tell people to have a first aid kit. If you carry a gun, that's because you're taking on the chance that you're going to get into a shooting. It may be for you, it may be for somebody around you, a loved one, and it may be for the bad guy, but just a sensible thing to do. In our carry classes, we teach how to put a tourniquet on, just because they became so common, and for a good reason. I don't want to knock on tourniquets. I do think people should carry chest seals, just because in the civilian environment, most shots go center mass, chest and torso cavity. So having
mhm.
something to, you know, plug those holes is important. So I'm a big proponent of that. Have your permit on you. So your driver's license, your carry permit, all the credentials that you should have on you legally, and have insurance, which we're going to talk about more in a minute. But we do live in a litigating. Excuse me.
Very excited about that. I know
Yep.
you brought back some flash and gear from Shot Show, but I was most excited of the fact of the relationship you've made with US Law Shield and the policies we're going to have over us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to talk about why I chose US Law Shield in relation to, and just so people know, I'm not getting paid anything by US Law Shield to do this. This is strictly the result of my personal um, research over the past few years, teaching this, talking to people, and figuring out what works best for me, right? But we're going to talk about that in a second. But the reason insurance is important, whether you go with US Law Shield or one of the other companies out there, right? The biggest one probably being USCCA. I
Right.
know the NRA has their own program.
Company as well. They're all pretty good.
Yeah. So we live in a litigating society. This is America. Everybody sues everybody for anything, and you can rest assured that if you draw your firearm, or even if you, just got a high pitch in my nose. I don't know if it was you putting your glass down or what.
No,
Uh,
no, no. Silver Savage stuff.
just getting old.
No, 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 the well, I mean, our viewers are going to know it anyway, but our products are being made, so the messages came through for our products and the labels, so they'll be ready soon. So,
Oh, got you. Well,
so it's
silence your notifications. Anyway, so again, you're gonna get sued just by brandishing a firearm. Not to mention, if you shoot somebody, you may be doing everything right, and somebody's gonna sue you. So having insurance to cover your, um, God forbid, medical expenses, but certainly your legal expenses, your loss of days of work, and so forth. It's super important. It is inexpensive in relation to everything else that is gun related, and the peace of mind that comes with it is, you can't put a price on that. So
right.
that is what I carry. That is my everyday, my
Your
EDC, my
EDs.
everyday carry. Right. In a nutshell. So what do you do differently in addition to the 17 knives you have on you?
I am a knife guy. I love knives. I know we do have a law enforcement certification knife class, which we both are certified law enforcement edged weapon instructors. And we just recently had a steak and knife class, which, if you missed it, sucks to be you, because Guy Raffaelli is phenomenal when it comes to sticks and knives. But my knives are separated as primary fighting knives and utilitarian knives. So I always have at least two knives. One's utilitarian, cutting seatbelts, Amazon packages open, which is more than likely, and one for fighting. I do have a flashlight. I have a little more real estate than you, because I have that tactical girth, because I have the body of a Greek god.
Tactical
Um,
graph is important.
yes, but I carry a Surefire pen flashlight, so it's very thin, very small, no batteries. It's rechargeable. I love it. It's rigid, has rigid edges, so even though it's a pen diameter, you can still strike with it as a Kubaton. On it, there's glass breakers. So I'm a big fan of having a glass breaker for either rescue or defense or offense, whatever it may be. I just like breaking glass. There's something therapeutic about it. I recently told you that I've gone to carrying two firearms now. And one's 9 mil, one's 9 mil short, or most people will know it as 380. And that was specifically for the fact that this incident that we're going to discuss, I went to my hip before I went to my appendix carry, which appendix carry is where I want to primarily go, which is how we carry. So I'm carrying a firearm on my hip and my appendix now. So kind of until I can build the muscle memory to my appendix again, then I'll switch it up and probably put one on my ankle or somewhere else. So I have my firearm, always a magazine. Even now, for two firearms, I'm carrying one magazine per firearm. So, and I know that can be a little too much, but again, I'm in a training phase at the moment. Once I'm out of that training phase, my backup firearm will not have a reload. My primary firearm will. As far as medical, 100% agree with you. In my vehicle, I have two separate bags. One's a trauma kit, and one's the ouch pouch, as I like to call it. So that has my airline travel kit that we talked about, and I transition it. It comes with me when I travel. It's back in the ouch pouch when I'm not. And it's got neck braces, cold compresses, splints. Trauma bag has the chest seals, decompression needles, tourniquets, you name it. One other thing I keep in my specific vehicle, and I'll transition stuff out of vehicles, are ballistic plates under every seat, at least where a child sits. And I have a plate carrier, a very minimalistic plate carrier with extra magazines and tourniquets under the driver's seat where I sit. So if I have to put it on, I can don it quickly. And that's in the vehicle. So not necessarily EDC, but it's a part of the vehicle if I can get to it. But specifically EDC, extra mags, light breaching tools like glass breakers, knives, and extra ammo. So, like I
Perfect.
said, synonymous to what you do. So,
Yeah, and I agree. You've seen my car. There's more stuff in it, but for the average Joe, most civilians probably, they'll draw the line somewhere. And that's the thing. People need to do their pros and cons and understand, listen, I got to prioritize what is most realistic for
Right.
me, what the environment I'm in, what's more likely to listen. If I don't have to worry about a family, my medical approach is different, my tactical approach is different, right?
Yeah.
If I live in an urban environment or rural environment, that would factor in, right? So each person's life is different, and that is something they need to account for.
And not just
uh,
that, I can tell you right now, my vehicle EDC, if that's a term, well, we're
it is
coining,
now.
yeah, the vehicle everyday carry, right? VEDC, um, changes seasonally. So in the wintertime, I have emergency mylar blankets. I have wool blankets in there. There's heating packets, etc. Because you just never know if my vehicle gets stranded, etc. And there's MREs or the civilian equivalent thereof in the vehicle. 3 days worth always in the vehicle. So if I got to hop in it and go, there's always something in there. And everyone's probably thinking, where do you put all this stuff? Listen, the car is full of voids. All right, learn from the narcos. All right, there you can put stuff anywhere. All right, in the wheel wells of the spare tires, you name it. Get creative. My kids have no freaking clue what's in that car. All right, but I do, and my wife does. So
And people may go, well, this Steve is a little crazy and he's going overboard, but the reality is just
I
as
am.
recent
I've
as
been politically declared crazy, but still, you know.
well, you are, and that's why I love you.
As the time as the saying goes, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
100%. But the point I was trying to make, just as recent as last month when we had the storms up north and we had people die
Mhm.
because they were unprepared, freezing to
Yep.
death, going into hypothermia and freezing in their cars because they were unprepared. Right? People used to
Fire
make fun of. Sorry, go ahead.
I said I even have fire starters in my car.
Oh, nice. So I was about to say people made fun of preppers, right, quote unquote, but then COVID happens and people are running out of toilet paper, and all of a sudden, like, you know what, being a little prepared is not that crazy after all. So it's
Yep.
all about, it's all about optics and putting it in context. And the reality is most
And just
people
having an
should have been
imagination.
walking up.
Listen,
Yeah.
just to throw you a bone, you put on that class, no one is coming, right? It was that class that spurred me to start putting fire starters in my vehicle because I didn't realize how many flammable things within the vehicle I could use to start a fire until we started picking those cars apart in the lots. So I'm like, great, bring a little flint starter, and I got plenty of kindle inside this car to start a fire to keep my family warm, myself warm, etc.
Yeah. To tell our listeners what we're talking about, we were in a class last year, was it, where we named it "No One Is Coming." We're talking a post-apocalyptic type event, or not even post-apocalyptic. COVID on crack a little bit, right? People, which happened, right? People are rioting, businesses are closed, can't go and buy groceries, stuff like that. So what do you do? And we talked about medicine stuff, how to procure medicine when you need it. We talked about general survival stuff. We took apart because we assumed some vehicles are going to be stranded on the side of the road when people can't drive it anymore because they ran out of gas. What's in car? We took two or three vehicles, I can't remember, and we completely disassembled them. We found medicines in one. We found all kind of stuff, tools. So there's stuff available that people don't think about. And then we did the sear component, right? We taught people, just
Right.
as much. Like I always said, I don't need to have all the toilet paper. I need to know who does because I have more ammo than they do.
Yeah, I always
So
joked about the person who stockpiled like silver and gold. I'm like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to melt down your silver and gold and turn it into bullets.
exactly. So, but what if somebody does that to you or tries to do that to you, right? So we taught them how to defeat
Wait.
certain types of restraint. Um, so that is a little bit about the what we carry. Let's talk about the insurance for a second, since we
Yes.
keep alluding to it. So there are various insurance companies out there. Again, they're all good. You got to do the research and find out what's good or what's best for you. Some of them will cover family members, some will not. The coverage amounts are different. The cost per month is different. Some of them will allow you to pick your own attorney, some of them will not. Some of them will require permits, some will not. Reciprocity between states. So certainly go ahead and do the homework. Now, USCCA, I'm not ragging on them. They are the largest in the country. They do a phenomenal job marketing. They give a lot of resources to their members, including online training and so forth. So nothing against them. But the reason I picked US Law Shield initially 2 years ago, and that was even before I knew anybody there, as I just met them this past week. But there are two things I like. The coverage was significantly higher. They were unlimited on some elements compared to UCCA. So God forbid I have to extend my attorneys or loss of days of work. Uh, my coverage was higher, but most importantly for me is they cover any self defense as long as it's legally done. They do not differentiate between whether I do it on uniform, out of uniform, on the job, off the job. You know, as long as it's legal and I didn't break a law in doing so, they will cover me. And I am
Go,
a lot more likely.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry, but
I'm a lot.
go ahead. You go.
Now
Go.
let me just let me just finish this thought. I'm a lot more likely to go hands on and hit someone in self defense,
Yes.
right, than shooting them.
Yeah.
And U.S.
We're on
lawship
the
would
same page. That's what I was gonna say. Go for it, man.
Yep, and U.S. lawship would cover me for that. Well, other insurance companies may not necessarily do so. So that was a big one for me. You know what? Initially, the only turnoff I had when I went with them is you do not get to pick your own attorney. You have to use one of their in-network attorneys. But I thought about it for a little bit, and then I realized I don't care what attorney I know is probably not as great in this specific kind of defense as an attorney picked up by one of these insurance companies. So
Amen.
if US Law Shields recommend this attorney, it's because that attorney is arguably the best in the field. And talking to them this past week, I got some of the names that are geographically um, close to us. And when they told me what those attorneys are doing and what they're capable of, some of the cases they were involved with, I just got so much more respect and appreciation to that.
Yeah.
So again, no, sorry, Steve, but I'm not being paid by US Law Shield. I just want to make it very clear. I have no relationship with them. This is just my personal preference. Although if you go and decide to go with US Law Shield, make sure you put my name down as a reference.
I was just gonna say that it's unfortunate that as a just a country loving patriot, I don't care what political party you're in. This is your home, this is your land. And we have every right to defend it and our little pocket of it. That we, as the law-abiding citizen, are at more we're more vulnerable and subject to more scrutiny than the average criminal. And I hate saying that, but you're a cop. I've been a cop for over 20 years and I've seen the flaws in the system. I can talk about it now that I'm retired. Unfortunately, I couldn't have for fear of retribution. Yes, it's real. I don't care who you are, what you say. I can speak empirically on all of it. And you always remind me I can now, more so because I'm retired, and I'll more happily do so. But we have to be able to defend ourselves. And unfortunately, the police, which there are men and women out there giving it their all, can't do it. They can't be there all the time. They're first responders. Keyword there, you're responding. And more than likely, it's after the fact. So our forefathers said we have a right to defend ourselves, and we need to we have to be able to do so. And unfortunately, there's a lot of obstacles coming in. So we have to protect ourselves. And this is where that US Law Shield comes in. So I was really excited when you said that.
Yeah, so we went ahead, we got coverage for ourselves, we got coverage for all of our security officers. So if they're working for us, they automatically are covered by, which means aside from our professional liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, and all of that, now as a benefit to them, if they, because they now have their carrier permits, right? All of them, well, they had it before as well, professionally, but now even personally, if they end up using their farms self defense outside of the job, they're still covered through this benefit we're giving them, which I think just another little thing we do for our guys. Um, so let's talk about tactics for a second, because tools are great, but tools
Yeah.
are only as good as the person operating it and only as good as the tactics you
And,
know.
and I've been dissecting my tactics from this incident. I mean, even to this moment, like I still like go back and forth, which every operator does that regardless. You do your after action reports, but even more so, like yourself, myself. I mean, I am tearing myself apart on this one incident. But go ahead, tactics.
So I can't wait for you to talk about it. But two things that I think are important when three things that I think are important when we talk about tactics, and nothing to do with your incident specifically. First of all, is weapon retention. I think people who carry a gun need to get trained in weapon retention. As you mentioned earlier, very right. There's always a gun in the fight, yours. Don't lose that gun. That gun is likely going to end up being used against you if you lose it. So that is one. People that don't take the time to train in weapon retention are doing a disservice to themselves. The second thing that's important is getting the gun in the fight. I don't care how good you shoot. If your gun is concealed, truly concealed, which means it's under clothing, it's tucked in your waistband, you're sitting in a car, getting the gun in the fight is key. If you cannot get a gun in the fight, it doesn't matter how good your shooting would have been, you know, you're already dead. So that is an element that oftentimes is missed on people. And third one is understanding the environment, right? Going into understanding cover and concealment, people around you, next points of movement, right? Communication. So all those things are key. Getting other people within our party to be on the same page as us, which I'm sure you're going to talk about in a second, and how your kids responded in that incident. But understanding the overall environment, the totality of the circumstances is key. So those are three elements that I think are paramount for people who decide they want to carry a gun, to invest a little bit of time and effort in training and really owning their capabilities and do that. And unfortunately, you can practice drawing from concealment dry. You can you can, I guess, practice to a certain extent weapon retention on your own, but understanding the totality of circumstances and the tactical environment, the only way you can do that is by scenario based through stress inoculation. And that is harder for most people to accomplish, right? Unless you're coming to our mayhem class where we do that every Sunday. But go ahead, Steve. I think this is a good opportunity for you to share your story with everybody. Let them know what happened.
Right.
What are some
Um,
of the things that went through your mind?
and just to, like, before I do that, just to validate everything you're saying, not even validate it, but just to reinforce it is the correct word. Um, when you take all those elements that you just described and you really commit yourself into being a 2A member of our country, then you're training yourself to get into a shooting instead of a gunfight, right? There's a difference, I can't remember the book I read it. He mentions it to some spy. I think it was Gray Work, but he mentions that too. When you train, when you decide to carry a firearm, all right, whether you're a tactical operator, military, or civilian 2A member, train to get into a shooting, train not into a gunfight. Right? It's one sided. If I get into a shooting, I saw the threat before it happened. I engaged the threat. It was over. Right? And then that's where my U.S. law shield that's already come into play.
It's funny. I'm going to throw something out there because I don't disagree with that. I would rather be one sided than two sided. Obviously, if I get into a shooting,
Right, and that's what I'm getting at. But I want to win the gunfight regardless.
right. But one thing that you and I always say when we teach firearms classes is people that come to classes, we're not going to teach you how to shoot. You should know how to shoot when you come to us. We're going to teach you how to fight with a gun, and that's a different mindset, right? That's a
And
different mindset.
I love that quote. That is a BK quote. I picked that up from you. Being Marine Corps, Army, tactical operations, you name it. I got to learn some of your tactics from Israel and train with Israeli units thanks to you. And that is one of the biggest things that never clicked in my head. The tool, the firearm was always a tool, right? That supported what I was already doing. But then you was like, no. That's an extension of you. You got to fight with it. That's when it really clicked. Like, I got to fight with my firearm, not shoot with my firearm. And there is a significant difference. And I had that moment of enlightenment when you punched me in the face and our relationship grew. But that's something people don't understand. It's not about aligning the sights and hitting that bullseye. That means absolutely nothing when the rubber meets the road, as the saying goes. But yes, so my incident. All right, let's dissect it, right? Because it's still eating away at me. Long story short, there was a subject in our county walking around slashing people's tires while they're in their vehicles, breaking out their windows, etc. Right? He was only damaging property, but obviously, as we know, there's an escalation, right? You start killing cats, next thing you know, you're killing people, right? Sorry for you cat lovers. I always reference the cat, but they just don't have a purpose in my life other than a second white meat.
And it's true.
So, I always like to joke when God was telling Adam, whatever you believe, to name the animals, the cat came by. God was like, "What the f is that?" So, anyway, so the guy's damaging property. Long story short, I'm taking my kids to school. I got my daughter in the driver's seat. I got my son in the back seat. Right.
Your
We're on
daughter's
an
in the driver's seat?
She's Yes, passenger seat. Sorry. You know what I'm trying to say. I'm exhausted and I'm drinking Makers. But anyway, I can't wait till she's in the driver's seat because I'm done driving these kids around. She's in the passenger seat. We're on an off ramp. We're about 5 cars behind. I see this person walk right. Um, I didn't see an altercation, but I immediately thought, okay, some kind of road rage. Maybe the car moved up, bumped him. He picks up a brick and throws it at the window. All right. And I'm like, oh crap. My kids saw it. They kind of panicked a little. I'm like, relax. I think it's some kind of road rage disagreement. The glass did not break. So kudos to the tempered glass manufacturers out there. Um, and when you're thinking firearms, think about that too. If you have to shoot through a windshield, there's some dynamics to that. And so I did what any person, and this is, I'm speaking to the 2A community. If you can't interject, because at that point there was absolutely nothing for me to do. I could have gotten out of the car, I could have yelled at the guy, whatever. It was pointless. I got kids in the car. I'm at an off ramp. I got hundreds of cars behind me. I got cars in front of me. No harm, no foul. That's what's going through my mind, right? The guy's walking away. He's looking back. So I did what I like to tell people to do is be a good witness. So I tried to get my phone out, get a picture of the guy, and I got the best description as I could because I knew they were going to call the cops, and I was going to do the same. Light turns green. I go to turn. I'm under overpass. I see the subject walking, and he flicks a knife open. Right at this point, he's walking away from me, and I slam on my brakes because the police instinct in me, although I'm not a police officer anymore, is reacting to what I just saw. My kids saw the same thing. They yelled, "Daddy, he's got a knife." Slam on my brakes. So what happens when I slam on my brakes? I make a screeching sound. What does that do? It draws attention. What does he do? Looks right at me, right? And he's literally at the front right corner of my car, the front right quarter panel. Turns around, starts walking towards me. What do I do as a warrior, as a police officer, years of military training, law enforcement? I draw my firearm and I point it. And it was at that moment, this is where, that whole time lapse happens, auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, etc. And my daughter was calm, that I remember. My son was panicking. And I was thinking in my head, do I shoot this guy or not? Because I'm in a vehicle, right? Right. He's outside. He's got a knife. He doesn't have a gun, right? But he's walking towards the side where my daughter is. So I have justification, right? And this is all happening in milliseconds. So as I have my firearm up and I'm pointing right at him, I'm thinking if I fire this pistol, forget the bullet, the overpressure alone is going to blow my kid's eardrums, right? The glass is going to shatter. I don't know what kind of secondary injuries I'm going to cause to my children. So he sees my guns, eyes goes wide. It clicks in my head. I hit the gas pedal. I take off, right? There's schools right there. I slam on the gas. I do a, night rider, fly into the parking lot, slam on my brakes, yell at my kids, get out of the car. Because now the warrior and protector in me is like, I got to go stop this guy before he hurts somebody. My daughter steps up to the plate, grabs her son, runs into school. I said, go tell the school administrator, pull the school on lockdown because he's 100 feet away. By the time I get back in the fight, he's gone, right? Get back to the school. I'm standing guard at the school. Police show up and I give the good description. Long story short, they eventually catch him, right? So let's go back to that moment, right? That moment where I draw my firearm, right? This is where I start dissecting, right? I think I made a good choice, right? Not shooting my firearm because he could have easily broken the glass, stabbed my daughter. The guy slashed tires. He's broken windows. He already has a history. I know who this guy is. So I can justify that. But at the same time, I can't cause
Well,
that
let me
second death.
stop you because some of that information you do not know at the time. So that second of doubt, I mean, that is a valid second of doubt. He certainly showed the means. He has a knife in his hand
Right.
and partial intent by turning towards you, but really, you know nothing about the guy. You don't know if he's actually trained. Because in Maryland, there are 4 things you need to
Correct.
justify, and one of them is absolutely knowing that that person is going to harm you, which you
Right.
do not know at the moment. So that is correct.
This is why I hit the gas and I got out of the fight, which is a valid self-defense. Remove yourself from the situation. And I got my
100%.
I got my kids out of the situation. I got myself out of the situation. I'll be honest. I probably should have stayed out of the situation because my head as a former police officer, I wanted to get back in the fight. But I'm a civilian now, and I was on the phone. I put the phone on speaker with 911 dispatch. So I put it on speaker, which a lot of people don't know to do. I just put the phone on speaker so I can continue doing what I'm doing and have
Did
my
you give
hands
them your
free.
badge number just by,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That's habit. No, I don't have a badge anymore, right? And it's funny because most of them know who I am. They know I'm very active, with Masada and everything. So I said, you need to get cops in the area now because I'm gonna go confront this guy right now. I am armed. I gave him this is something as 2A members you should know as well. If you have to call the police and you're in an incident, I gave a full description of what I was wearing. All right. I told him I got a blue puffy jacket, I got blue jeans, gray sneakers, my firearm's gonna be in my right hand, my identification is gonna be in my left hand. I was very specific with that. And as I was moving towards where I last saw the suspect, the dispatcher yelled at me, I don't suggest you do that. And then I kind of snapped, I came back into reality and I'm like, okay, I'm going to protect the school and the kids because this guy's still running around. And, the police showed up. I waved them down and I gave them a good description. They found out and they did their job. They did a phenomenal job and they ended up catching the suspect and he's still in prison now because he's been doing this before. But again, it came down to that one specific moment where we travel with our kids, right? And we have firearms in the car. And shooting a firearm outside of a car as opposed to inside of the car, very different. You've done it, I've done it. I'm probably still suffering from the repercussions of it. Um,
So, so let's talk about that for a second because you and I talked about it before, but just for the sake of our listeners again, we see all these videos of very sexy drills, people shooting in cars through windshields and so forth. But one thing that we need to point out is all those people in those training evolutions are wearing eye protection and ear protection on. And I don't know about you, but I don't tend to drive around with ear pros and eye pros on. And as someone who's instructor, when I went through the counterterrorism school, said, okay, you're going to fire one round in a car through a windshield with no ear pros, which I'm pretty sure is against regs, but that was I don't
it's
know,
against
30 years
facial
ago.
regulation.
Well, not in Israel, it ain't. But
Not in
anyways,
America, it is.
you fired a one round, and like you mentioned, it's people think noise. It's not the noise. It's a concussion that puts you
Yeah.
out. It's like being hit in the head with a baseball bat, and and that is what really is going to put you out of the fight. Now, is there a chance you're going to have to shoot through windshield? 100%. There's a video that surfaced maybe a couple years ago of I think it's a Florida police officer shooting his AR while driving at a suspect's car. There's a lot of things that I would probably not have done, but to this officer's, credit, it worked. And but that is probably the anomaly and the exception to the rule. Um, shooting in a car is not something that we recommend you do. If you're gonna fire around from the vehicle, present your muzzle outside the window so that
Right,
pressure
and
dissipates
that's
on the
something
outside.
you teach in our advanced pistol classes. You're very adamant about describing that. And I always say, even when I was a police instructor, and I would tell these officers, you pull up into a situation, you're in your vehicle, and you're present, firearms presented. What do? They're like, oh, get out the car, fight this and that. No, you're still in the car. Hit the gas, get the hell out of there. Removing yourself from the situation or tactically retreating is a valid self defense. We say this when we teach our normal self defense classes to civilians all the way up to the military. Running away is not a bad thing. It's not at all.
It has to be done with a purpose and with a goal, right? You can't just ignore a problem. But 100%, like you said, that may very well be the best course of action in that moment in time, just to set us up for better success coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
So I
And,
agree. Uh,
and one thing I didn't mention, if let's say hypothetically speaking, right? Let's remove the kids from the vehicle. Would I have been justified in shooting him? I know as law enforcement officers for a while, they talked about the 21-foot rule, right? When it comes to a subject wielding a knife. I used to teach edge weapon tactics in the police department, and we're both certified law enforcement edge weapon instructors. And one thing I learned about the 21-foot rule is not a rule at all, and many officers were prosecuted because they try to use that as their defense. You and I know a knife is a close quarters weapon. If there's a barrier between you and that knife wielding person, then you're good, quote unquote, theoretically. And they'll
right.
use that in their defense. So 2A members need to know that. You can't just, oh, he's got a knife, pull my gun and shoot him because I'm within 21 feet or some other theoretical idea. There's other variables in play there. So
Yep.
even if my kids weren't there, I had to tell myself, like, I probably would not have been really justified in shooting this guy if I'm doors locked in my car with the ability to drive away.
100%, because that's always what they're going to look at, right? Did you have another option? The idea is to
Hmm.
not use the amount of force that you need to stop the threat, but it's use the least amount of force you need to stop a
Yeah.
threat. And if
The
there's a
reason.
lesser option, yep. So, one thing we tell people in our classes all the time, because ideally, listen, we have all these listeners now listening to this podcast and watching our YouTube channel and so forth. And ideally, I'd like each and every one of them to either come and take classes by us or bring us in to teach them. But I know realistically that's not going to happen. Not because ill intent, just people, life, money and time and other obligations and resources. It's just not going to happen. So, one thing we always recommend people to do, a second best thing, is to play the what if game, right? Put
Yeah.
yourself in Steve's situation. You're in the car, your kids are in the car, somebody's coming towards you with a knife. What would you do? I use an example when I teach my wear and carry class. I tell, because we talk about the what if game, right? Because there's enough research supporting that the brain does not know the difference between reality and imagination.
Amen to
As
that.
far as far as your brain knows, you just going through the motions. Those neuromuscular connections are being established. And the example we always use is of athletes being sidelined for an injury. While they're sidelined, they're going over their sport over and over and over again. And when they come back to play, they're actually better than they were before because they just got thousands of repetitions in their specific skill set, right? So what I tell people, I live in Anne Arundel County now. I used to live in Baltimore County. I'm not a big fan of Baltimore City. No offense to those listeners who live there. Um, I try to avoid that part of town. But every so often I have to go down there. And the very first time I drove to Baltimore City on the corner of President and Fayette, which for those that don't know, 83 kind of drops you into the city, becomes President, the first major intersection. Across the street, Caddy Corner, is Baltimore City headquarters, Baltimore City Police Department headquarters, right? Um, the Squeegee Boys. One of them is coming towards my car. I've never seen a squeegee boy. They don't have those in Israel. I threw a gun because all I saw was a person coming at me fast with something, a blunt object in his hand. And that was a trigger for me since then. And I know you had your own incident with a squeegee boy if you want to share in a minute. But
Yes,
for
I
me,
did.
from that point on, every time I'm in that intersection, whether there's a squeegee boy there or not, doesn't matter. I I go for the what if game. What if somebody came at me, but instead of a squeegee, it was actually a gun? Do I drive away? Do I give it in the car? Do I shoot them? And it depends. And the variables are always different. If I have the kids in my car, I can't give them the car. If I'm boxed in, I can't drive away. If the backdrop is not permissive, I can't shoot. Right. So there's always something a little bit different whenever I get to that intersection. And I would say that to date, I probably got hundreds of repetition on what to do if somebody came to my car with a gun. And
Hmm.
if that ever happens, it doesn't have to be that intersection, any intersection, my brain is more likely to respond appropriately because it's been there before. It knows how to respond. It already had that repetition going on, right? So I'm a big fan of that. And I think your scenario is a perfect one to explain to people. Change the variables. Your kids are in the car. Your kids are not in the car. The person has a knife. The person has a gun. You can drive away. You cannot drive away. What would you do?
Right.
So
And it's
you
funny
want
we talk. Oh, go ahead.
to, sorry, go ahead.
No, because we, in military law enforcement, we have after action reports, right? Talk about tactics, what you went down. I actually did this with my kids, and God bless them. They both said, "Next time, Daddy, just get out the car and shoot the guy if you have to." And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I don't know if I'd be justified, etc. But I ran through the scenarios with them again. I think we had run scenarios before. They did a phenomenal job. When I pulled into the school, we went into training mode, and I told my daughter, grab your brother. You know what to do. Get in the school, advise the administrators to go into lockdown, which they did. The school did go into lockdown for 30 minutes. And I told the administrators I would stand down. So that just goes back to training and running through these, like you said, scenarios. But run them with your kids, make it fun. We do fire drills in my house. You know what I mean, and we make it fun. We can get out the house the fastest. They get a milkshake. Blah, whatever it may be. But run these scenarios. I grab Nerf guns and we do room clearing. Hey, if a bad guy comes in the house, what do you do? Lock your doors and etc. You got to run through these scenarios so you build a muscle memory. And again, it's not that although it's going to be a traumatic experience regardless, it's not as traumatizing for the kids because I'll admit my son was pretty disturbed by all of this. So I
I
had
would
the school
imagine.
administrators, yeah, I had the school administrators talk to him, and I talked to him afterwards. And he basically told me, like, Daddy, I saw you pull your gun out and I thought you were going to kill someone. And I told him, how did that make you feel? And unfortunately, with our current times, and I jokingly say I was proud of his answer, but at the same time, as a kid, you want kids to be kids. But he was like, Daddy, I would have been happy that you killed the bad guy. And in retrospect, I'm like, that's cool. Like, yeah, kill the bad guy, but still, the fact that that has to be the answer because there's so much going on these days
Right.
was pretty sad.
Yep, 100%. And you know what? That's a good idea and one that I'll take from you and start implementing because I've done with my kids drills at home, right? Whether it's a fire drill or a shooter drill, right? The response would have been the same as far as they're concerned. So, because I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. So,
Well,
we've done those in the past. I've never done anything with them in a car. Not to come to think about it. I go for the scenarios in my mind. I know what I would do and what I would yell at them, but I don't know how they would respond to it because we've never actually done it. So that would be interesting to go through that exercise
yeah,
with them.
we've done some, pull the panels out under the seat, get down low on the car and put them over your head. This was a new one, but the end part of it was fine. I said, get out of the car. My daughter being the oldest, she knew, and God bless her, she was calm, cool, and collective. I go back into the school and she's actually smiling in the hallway because she was so proud of how well she did. Grabbing her brother and getting to school and telling the administrators because none of her friends believed her until the school went on lockdown. So that when I went to the school the next day, all the kids were like, "Hey, Mr. Steve, blah, blah, blah." I was like the cool dad. So I had those
There you
brownie
go. We all want to be the cool dads. Nice. Um, that's awesome. So bringing the whole thing around some stuff because again, people and I highly, 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 support of this. The fact that so many more people are now carrying concealed weapons and the movement is in that direction, nationally speaking, I think that's a great trend. Uh, but like you mentioned, and I mentioned in my classes, it is a huge responsibility. People should
Mhm.
not take it lightly. Uh, you have responsibility for yourself, for your loved ones, for society. So once you decide to do that, you got to take the extra step. Carry the right tools, get the right training, get the right insurance. Make sure that you don't leave opportunities for bad things to happen that are associated with you carrying a gun. And I
Right.
think that's where people should really take the next step. And
Yeah.
we mentioned before, and you talked about it, and I mentioned with U.S. Law Shield, but the reality is, what happens after the shooting? So let's say you shot somebody, right?
Oof.
Anything from medical to legal to emotional support, right? How many people take the time to think about that? They all want to be Rambos, they all want to be heroes, right? But
Right.
they don't understand what's the toll on you.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's the thing. Like, even if you're the good guy, right? And you stop the
Especially if
bad
you're the
guy,
good guy.
it doesn't matter. I thank God or whatever you believe in that as a law enforcement officer, and I'll just leave it at that. You can interpret it as you want. I never had to kill anyone, but I've been in many situations where I've come very close to it. And one of the last ones, being when I was in tactical operations, it came very close to the point where the auditory exclusion happened. I heard my partner's rifle clicking off safety. All these things happened within a millisecond. I had the report written. I could see my sights. I could see at that moment. I could feel my finger pulling the trigger, but then I realized it wasn't a gun, but my finger was still pulling the trigger because everything slowed down. That being said, when it was all said and done, and this wasn't even firing the weapon, I was nauseous. I couldn't sleep for weeks. I mean, just the thought that I was about to take someone's life, which I hate to say wasn't new to me, but wasn't new to me. And I was used to the physiological and psychological effects, still happened, and I was fine with it. I never lost a day of work or anything like that, but I had to deal with that. Now you add the factor of taking someone's life, which we've both been in, in military operations and stuff like that. Um, it's a little more impersonal in the military, but it can be personal. And we've had personal situations. Your whole world gets turned upside down. There's physiological effects, there's psychological effects. And then if you don't address those effects, they're going to be, they're going to affect your family, your friends, etc. You don't want to become that person. So it's not just a matter of protecting yourself legally, it's a matter of protecting yourself psychologically. Um, because I'm your brother, I have to see a therapist. Just being in your presence deems that, apparently, because everyone in your presence has to see a therapist. um, but it's something that they have to consider. When you decide, I'm going to take the concealed carry class, and I guarantee, and I think you can agree, there is a large number of people out there that just get it and don't think nothing else of it thereafter. There's a lot of considerations that come with it. So
And it's funny you mentioned that because yesterday, actually, not yesterday, this morning, my time's all screwed up since traveling back from Vegas. But I went over our CCW uh, presentation, the one we give in the class, because we're supposed to do one this weekend. There's one in 2 weeks, and there's a lot of stuff that was going through my mind in preparing for this podcast. And I was revising some things. For example, I added a chest field. So we always talked about tourniquets. I'm like, you know what? Tourniquets are great. Again, not taking away from them. I want our students to know how to put a chest seal on. It's super simple. They should understand it. They should put it on. Um, but with that, I just added a couple slides specifically talking about what steps you should take before you start carrying a gun, preparing you to what would happen after you deploy that gun. So, do you have a doctor that you trust? Do you know where your trauma center is like? How do you notify your wife without creating mass, confusion and improper information or disinformation going out there, right? Who actually notifies your significant other if needed? Um, the legal side of it. The one thing with US Law Shield that I brought up to them is like, I understand your attorneys are great. I want to talk to them in advance. I don't want my first call to an attorney be, I got into a shooting. You were assigned to me by US Law Shield. Come save my behind. I want to create a relationship in advance. I want to talk to them.
right,
I wanted to understand who I am, where I'm coming from, what's my world like. So the next time I call them, God forbid, if I do, it's not just Joe Schmo off the street. There's a background there, right? So people need to understand if you're going to carry a gun, it is because you taking on the assumption that at some point you may deploy said gun. If you weren't to, then why carry it to begin with, right? And if you're gonna deploy said gun, then what's gonna happen after you did? Okay. Are you injured? Do you know how to treat yourself? How to treat a loved one? Do you know where to get that medical aid? Do you know how to get in touch with the attorney and who that attorney is that's gonna come for your help? Because you're gonna get sued, or you may have to sue somebody else, right? And then the emotional support after. Do you have resources to go to, anything from family to religious individuals or whatever it is that you go to for mental and emotional assistance? You need to have those network in place, because it's what we try to do when we teach a CCW class is prepare people for the worst day of their life. And you and I can say that from experience. There is nothing heroic, okay, that's fun about getting into a shooting. All the romanticized things that people say in movies is BS. And
yes.
people have to understand that. So again, not to try to persuade people not to, or dissuade, I guess, people from carrying firearms, but just making sure they're fully prepared.
Yes, amen to
Steve?
that. And not, yeah.
No, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you're 100% accurate. Whether it's out on the street or in the home, especially if you have family. Like, my guns are always locked up, safe, etc., in proper, storage compartments and whatnot. So there's so many facets in this that we can really dissect, and I'm sure you'll say it. But any of our listeners that are, want further training, they can reach out to you, me, Masada, etc. Or if they're not geographically close to us, there's plenty of places out there that can provide that as well. Or we'll come to you. Hell,
And one thing that we haven't done in the past, but I really want to start pushing, if anybody that listens to this podcast has any questions as a result of the podcast, feel free to send us a message. The easiest way to get a hold of us is just BK at Masada Tactical, or Salmanderas, Steve
yeah,
S. Salmanderas. We need to
yes.
change your email to just Steve at
You
Masada
tried.
Tactical.
You screwed everything up.
Well, sorry, just reach out to BK at
Yes.
masadatactical.com, and I'll forward it to Steve as well. But ask us questions so we make sure that we can address that. And if we don't have time, the answer. We'll make sure to consult the right people to get you the right answers. But at the end of the day, this is a resource for all of you guys out there and gals. Steve, I think this was a fascinating conversation. A lot of topics that you and I spoke in the past, and finally packaged together, I guess, into some semi-coherent thought.
Are we ever coherent?
That is true. So thank you for your time. It is Friday afternoon, so go and hang out with your family. Don't shoot anybody, and I'll see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Later, brother. We hope you enjoyed this latest episode. Please go ahead and like our podcast and subscribe. Check out our YouTube channel and follow us on all other social media channels, including Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.